Thank you for that lovely introduction. I think a lot of people in the room already know my background very well by now, and the fact that I can't hold down a job for longer than a couple of years. I'm sure you've all bought yourselves a copy of my book, and just plug this before I kick off. It's an absolute steal, 700 packed pages for $300 and $150 if you're a student. So I do recommend it. And the money doesn't go to me, it goes to the IPPR, so could be better. Okay, great. Let me say a few remarks before I kick off with the presentation. The first is, I'd like to thank Clemens and the Hans Seidel Foundation for allowing me to do this presentation. It was long an ambition of mine, because I feel we often have talking fora in Namibia, but we don't systematically, year on year, track developments in the economy and progress on policies and setbacks and challenges and things. So this, for the first time, has given me the opportunity to look back over a year. I last gave a presentation last September about the state of the economy, and also to look forward. And with luck, this could become a firm fixture in the Namibian Economic calendar, diary, and we can check on progress year on year, and people can correct me when I make mistakes in my presentations. So I very much like that. That's the first point. The second point is, I think it's absolutely wonderful that there's such a good turnout tonight. There's clearly an interest in the Namibian economy, in our economy, getting it moving forward. And it's great to see such a wide spread of people. I don't know a lot of you in the audience. I recognise quite a few faces. But it's great. There's young and old, there's black and white, and there's, pretty much everything there. And I think that's exactly how it has to be, because our economy is all our responsibility. It's not just the responsibility of the minister, the president. We all have a role to play, and we all have a responsibility to make sure things move forward and the right decisions are made. Now, we might not always agree on what those right decisions are, but that's why I think fora like this have a role to play. So that's the second point. What a great turnout. What a wonderful audience you are. The third is, this really isn't actually about Robin just lecturing you and throwing lots of facts and figures at you and telling you what I think. I mean, I do have lots of views. Having studied this economy for 30 years, I've got a view on pretty much everything, but it's not necessarily correct. But I think it is a way of sharing some data, some common data, which we can all share and interpret and work out what that means, and also tackle some common issues. My view isn't necessarily correct. I possibly argue them with a certain amount of passion, but I'm happy to admit that I'm not always right. I have to say, if you look at my book, you'll see mostly I am right. I shouldn't say that, but I had to. No, but I think it really isn't just me lecturing you, and that's what we want to get away with. I will lecture you, I'll throw 20 PowerPoint slides at you. Hopefully you'll survive that. Hopefully there'll be lots of questions after that. So let me kick off. I normally try and sort of pick a picture which sort of sums up the presentation I'm giving, because I often feel a picture stays in people's minds long after the sort of 20th, 30th bullet point does. And the picture I've chosen today, if I can use this correctly, this picture here. What do you think that means? Dr. Itula, what do you think the interpretation, what is that picture saying? Okay, is it really? No, sorry, okay, well, the answer is a fork in the road. A fork in the road, that's a very literal interpretation of a fork in the road, but that is where I believe we are at the moment in Namibia. We've come over 30 years, and that's all documented in the book, but we're at a very new moment in our economic history. I think things are changing globally for all sorts of reasons, and things will change domestically. There are new industries on the horizon. So I think we have some very important decisions to make, and over the next year or two, possibly in the run-up to the next national elections here, a lot of those very important decisions will be made, which will set the course for the rest of the decade and indeed beyond. So I think we are at a very special time, although some of you have been to previous presentations of mine will probably say, well, Robin said that before. So there have been plenty of forks in the road during the last 30 years. So that's my presentation today. Let me just remind you of the story so far. So last September I gave a presentation on the state of the Namibian economy, as I've already mentioned. I had a picture of Martin Tung, I should have superimposed a picture of Hagi Geingobb's face on him, but I didn't have time for that. But I called it Waiting for Namibia's Great Leap Forward. And the idea there was that things are going to change at some stage in this decade. I essentially made 3 points, and the first one of those were, since 2016, our economic performance has been pretty poor, and I asked the question, why? The second was my interpretation, because the chickens came home to roost after many, many years of misdesigning policies, misimplementing policies, throwing money at the wrong things. This all came together in around 2016 and led to a number of years of poor economic performance. That was my interpretation of the data, my interpretation of what had happened. I don't expect everyone to agree with that. Of course, the politicians will say, yes, it was the drought, yes, it was global mineral prices, all sorts of things, but I don't buy those reasons. So my view was that economic policy making, design and implementation has been poor, with economic considerations relegated to political and ideological ones. I think there's plenty of evidence for that in fact right in the case. The third main point I was trying to make is that there are 2 major developments on the horizon. Oil and gas. Shell had already drilled their first successful well earlier in 2022, followed by Total Energies, and green hydrogen. And these are potentially significant new industries that will change the whole nature of our economy. There will be structural change in our economy, there having been very little over the past 30 years. So those were the points I was trying to make. I'm not sure they really sank in. Maybe I threw too many bullet points at you last year. But that was the story I was trying to tell. Okay, now we're at the State of the Economy 2023, so we're a year down the road essentially. And I just want to give you an outline of what I'm going to talk about today. Hopefully I won't drone on for too long. The first thing is I want to review the latest economic indicators with you, so share some data with you. I think that's always a good starting point because we can mostly agree on the data, we can disagree on the interpretations, but I think generally speaking, data is important. I see Robert smiling there in the front row. Data is important and it tells a story. We just have to work out what it's telling us. So we're going to review some latest economic indicators. Then we're going to go over the last year since I gave that presentation last September. And I just want to quickly run through some sort of key events as I see them. And hopefully that will provide some basis for discussion when we get to the question session. But that's the whole point of this presentation. We look back and then we look forward. And then I want to do a quick review of some policy developments which I think are very important. As an economist, public sector economist, for me, policy is all important. It's all about policy. It's not about how much oil you've got in the ground. It's not about where you're located. It's all about getting the policies right. And those countries that manage to crack that nut can be very successful. I don't think we've managed that yet, although we have in certain aspects. It's definitely not all negative. So I'm going to review the policy developments and I'm going to look ahead very briefly to the coming year. And let me just remind you, most of the information I'll be using in the presentation is actually contained in the quarterly economic review that was mentioned in the introduction, which the IPPR publishes every quarter. It contains updated economic data, the latest available. It contains news events and highlights, what's happened in the economy, and there's always a feature as well, so I focus in on a particular issue in that QBR. So since the last presentation, I did one on global economic development, so Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the implications that's had for energy policy and food security. Something about government debt, that's an updated view of a paper I've done earlier. Something about electricity supply industry in Namibia, and something about land reform statistics, that's the latest one. So you're all very welcome to download these QERs free of charge every quarter. It's all there on the IPPR website. And I have to say, in a country where not that much is available on the economy and economic analysis free of charge, I'm constantly surprised by the number of people who've never heard of my QER and who don't download it free of charge. So it's all there. I encourage you to do that. So let me kick off. Let me run through a little bit of data with you quickly. So first I'm going to focus in on growth. That's how big the economy is, whether it's been expanding or contracting. This is the latest data of economic growth since I think 2008, since before the financial crisis. And you can see the blue bars are positive growth. It's actually not terribly clear, is it? The red bars are negative growth. But you can see, if you look very closely, from 2016 onwards, growth sort of started to completely fizzle out. Then obviously COVID came along in 2020, imposed a huge hit on the economy, from which we started to recover now. Two blue bars following that big red bar down, and the Bank of Namibia's latest forecast that we're going to see some modest growth over the coming 2 years, so around the 3% mark this year and next year. So we're sort of bouncing back from that COVID hit. That's the quarterly data which the NSA very kindly provides as well, which is very useful. You can see recent quarters as well in blue positive bars, so the economy is definitely bouncing back as far as GDP is concerned. So the President called this the year of revival. I think there's ample evidence to support that as a sort of rubric for the whole year. So we are coming back from COVID. We're almost back where we were before the hit took place, with modest growth ahead in this year and next year. That's the growth story. Investment. Let me show you my favorite chart. So this is a picture of investment stripping out the effects of inflation. I think I'm expressing it as a percentage of GDP. And I'm splitting investment up into private sector investment in the light blue, parastatal or state-owned enterprise investment in the grey, I think. Sorry, I can't read the charts here. Unforgivable. Yeah, there we are. I can see it more clearly here. So the light grey is state-owned enterprises, and the black is central government. So this is the pattern of fixed investment we've seen in the economy for the last few years. And that is as a proportion of the size of the economy. And I think you'll agree that there is a clear trend there. Fixed investment has been on the way down for some time now. And where there was a little peak in 21, it's back down again. And it's across all parts of the economy, both the private sector, the state-owned enterprise sector, and the central government sector. So not a pretty picture. If you express those numbers in a similar way, going back rather longer, and these are now also expressed as a percentage of GDP, you can see in the blue this is total fixed investment, I think private fixed investment. So I'm not looking at government here, it's a blue bar, you can see that on the chart, that's private investment. But if you strip out the mining investment, private mining investment, you get the red line. And I don't know how you interpret that, but it's not a great look, basically. Private investment outside the mining sector for quite a long time has been pretty much in the doldrums. And the question we have to ask ourselves is why? Why is this happening? Is it drought? Is it global mineral prices? Is it Robin Sherbourne's explanation? You know, we need to have this debate because this is absolutely crucial. Structural change, we look at this every quarter, but only changes annually. But I've got a chart here breaking down Namibia's GDP into the different sectors. This comes from the NSA's national accounts. You don't need to look too closely. I've created this pie chart every year since 1990, essentially. And believe me, it doesn't change dramatically. We're pretty much, in terms of which sector makes up which proportion of the economy, we're pretty much where we were a long time ago. And that goes to the primary sectors, the secondary sectors, and the tertiary sectors. But of course, with limited investment and growth, you're not going to see substantial economic structural change, are you? Because you need new industries to come in to change that structure, and that requires investment. And that hasn't been taking place. So there's been very little structural change. On monetary policy, again, I don't want to talk too long. You know, I could give a whole lecture on just monetary policy. These presentations are designed for the average person who's interested in the economy as a whole. You can see here I've plotted the Namibian inflation going right back to 2008. I think Namibia's in the red. You can see how it's been going up and down since then. After the world economic crisis came down, it's been bouncing around a bit. The blue is South Africa's inflation. You're all fully aware that we're linked monetarily to South Africa. When their interest rates move, our interest rates tend to move. When they have inflation, we tend to get inflation. We import a lot of goods and services from South Africa. You know the story. But it looks at the end there as if inflation is having gone up following the events of February 2022. It seems to be coming down now, and COVID, of course, which is a good news story. And there are repo rates, our central bank lending rate to banks, essentially, and how monetary policy has tried to get ahead of inflation, tried to dampen down economic activity, to dampen down those inflationary pressures in the economy. And you can see we're now starting to level off. The last Bank of Namibia's monetary policy committee decision was to keep rates on hold. So I'd say inflationary pressures rose after COVID. There were all these supply chain issues that pushed prices up. Then Russia invaded Ukraine, and that affected energy prices and grain prices, food prices. Central banks around the world, our Bank of Namibia and the South African Reserve Bank, and other reserve banks, they had to put interest rates up to come down on inflation. Did they do so fast enough at the right time? We can have a big debate about that. But certainly South African inflation is now back within their 3 to 6% band. Inflation in Namibia seems to be coming down, and the Bank of Namibia is forecasting an average inflation of 5.6% this year. Fiscal policy, well, I put out the same charts in my budget commentary every year. This is a chart that shows you government revenue, government expenditure, the difference between the two, budget balance. And the budget balance is mostly in red because we tend to spend more than we bring in revenues. So there's a budget deficit which has to be financed by selling treasury bills and bonds to the markets. Very clearly, the current minister has tried to stabilise levels of debt, which are now around 70% of GDP. And you can see that red chart which shows the ratio of public debt to the size of the economy to GDP levelling off over the last few years. So it's certainly not going down, we're still borrowing more, but because the economy is now growing again, that ratio is starting to tail off. He's doing that without, I would say, any very significant deep-seated public sector reform. So he's hoping that the economy bounces back, generates a bit more revenue, that can be used to borrow a bit more, but not too much more, and therefore the ratio of debt to GDP goes down. Stabilised debt. I mean, the interesting thing about this, and I've written a little feature in one of those previous PRs, is that we're already at very high levels of debt to GDP as a country, and yet we're still going out looking for more government debt. There are all sorts of things that government wants to borrow for. I mean, hydrogen is one, possibly oil and gas is another, all sorts of infrastructure things. So the question is, how do you square that circle? Can you continue to borrow? And I think, in a way, we're in uncharted territory in Namibia now. If we go beyond 70% of GDP, we've never been anywhere near that before. And it raises a whole set of issues as far as what is sustainable and what is responsible as far as fiscal policy is concerned. Carry on, credit and banking, I'm not going to say much. This is credit, private sector credit extension. It's all pretty much in the doldrums. There's not an awful lot going on. Mortgages, and this is another indicator of non-performing loans. So commercial banks, non-performing loans, this all comes from Bank of Namibia. Obviously peaked around the time of COVID. Businesses were really struggling to pay back loans to the commercial banks. It's come down a bit. Last quarter, it's gone up again. It's not falling down to where it has been historically, but although by Namibian historical standards, the figure is quite high compared with other countries, and it's not that high to say. But it's not being complacent, that's just a statement of fact. So credit growth extremely sluggish, bank non-performing loans high by historical standards. These are indicators of what's going on in the economy. If the economy is growing fast, you'll see credit growth growing fast, because it has to finance that growth, and that's not happening. Some other indicators we track, I think these are vehicle sales, so this is again for the bank, just the sum of commercial and passenger vehicle sales every month. You can see during COVID, not quarterly, it's coming back up steadily, but not spectacularly. It's still a lot lower than it has been in the past few years. And this is a new indicator that I track. I just put the diesel and petrol price in because it just really does affect pretty much everything, from the cost of taxi fares to just the cost of doing business. that seems to have now leveled off after shooting right up following Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. So vehicle sales slowly recovering, and petrol and diesel prices have stabilised. Then I've got one more indicator which I wanted to share with you. I don't include this in the QER, it's something I track very closely anyway, because diamonds are our major single source of exports in this country. We are still very much a diamond-dependent economy. And you can see here, this is annual NAMDEB, rough diamond production since 2014, when Anglo-Americans started making those numbers available. And you can see 2022, the blue part of the bar is the offshore diamond mining, so dead marine, basically. And the brown part, the orange part, is the onshore. So that whole ratio has changed over the decades as offshore mining has started to dominate. And in 2022, dead marine launched a new vessel, the Repo Rate. I was fortunate enough to be at the launch in Morphus Bay. It was a fantastic event, fantastic vessel, built in Romania, fitted out in Cape Town, operated by a totally Namibian crew in the waters. And you can see what a difference it made in 2022. That's almost like a sort of a floating mine of 500,000 carats a year. That's what they were saying at the launch, and it was borne out by the statistics in 2022. 2023, this is only half-year results. This is just the sum of quarter 1 and quarter 2. So if you can imagine that bar doubling, that would be absolutely significant. So Benguela gem, dead marine, shooting lights out as far as diamond production is concerned. But then overall, a picture of an economy that's not changing dramatically. It's slowly recovering from a significant shock of COVID, and we're sort of getting back to where we were before. I won't go into cutting and polishing, partly because there's no reliable data on it, which is a bit of a shame. Okay, let me move on then. That's the sort of review of the data. So I'm going to just go through a few highlights. Now, these are highlights that I've picked out from my QERs over the last year. There are lots of other things I could have chosen, but we could have been here all night actually, because there are so many interesting things going on which economists are keen to comment, but I'll limit myself. So this is my first one. So going from the last presentation. So 10th of October, Rio Zim by Sperry diamond mining. That was an interesting deal because if you remember, SDM was created out of Lucore, who bought Elizabeth Bay mine for NAMDEB. It's already changed hands several times. I've tried to say whether these events I'm tracking are good, bad, or neutral, or hard to say. I don't know. I don't know the Rio Zim guys, to be honest, but it seems there's something interesting going on there, which might not be diamond related. 12th of October, NIPDB launches the digital nomad visa. I think that's a nice innovation, something positive that NIPDB has done. It's not huge, but I think it's a signal. It's a signal that we're open to innovation, that we're open to people from the rest of the world who have skills and who can come and do useful things here. 17th of October, I think very interestingly, TIL, part of the MSC, the world's largest shipping group, privately owned group, was selected to run the Namibia Port Container Port. I thought that was an interesting move because it wasn't the candidate that we were expecting to win this competition, but things have gone a bit quiet since then, so I'm not actually sure what's happening. But again, it's a signal to the outside world that we're serious about our container port, we get serious investors in, do serious things and put us on the map. So I thought that was a positive thing. 25th of October, Minister Shini tables the midterm budget review. Well, it was, pretty much as it always is. We've got a huge public service. Once we pay for that, there's not much money left to do anything else very creative. So he sort of manages to stabilise debt a bit more, a bit more revenue. So certainly not a train smash. I think in the pantheon of Namibian budgets, it was a reasonable budget. But of course, if Robin was minister, things would be a lot more exciting. 28th of October, NIPDB launches a one-stop shop. Again, a very positive move, I think. We're moving in the right direction. We're doing the things that need to be done if we want to attract more investors. 7th of November, we launched a synthetic fuel strategy. I think it's very exciting. This relates to the whole green hydrogen initiative. I'll say a bit more about it later. 8th of November, we signed a strategic partnership with the EU on minerals and renewable energy and green hydrogen. again, potentially very exciting. I put hard to say because we don't really know these international deals. I know I've got my European friends here. I'm sure they're not positive, Federica, but I'm putting it out in that last column. So some interesting things going on. Let me carry on. 28th of November, we have the Swaziland Congress and the elections of the new Swaziland vice president, which is very exciting. But you never know how good people end up as presidents. I'm not going to comment on that until it's steering clear, but it's certainly a significant landmark event. 10th of December, yes, Fitch comes along again and reaffirms our credit rating. Yes, we've still got junk status, our fiscal position is still pretty much what it was. The rest of the world sees us as not a particularly good bet, but they say we're at least a relatively stable, not particularly good bet at the moment. So we get a stable rating. 19th of December, another sale of mine. Chivali ran into trouble, Canadian listed, sells to Appian. Let's hope Washpinal will thrive under the new owner. Very difficult to say with these deals. 29th of December, and I've highlighted this not because I have anything against One Uranium, the Russian uranium company, because I think it does demonstrate the Ministry of Agriculture refusing water extraction permits. It does indicate that we are serious about the environment of this country. We're prepared to take action, even when it could possibly slow down investment if that action is warranted. So that's really why I'm highlighting it. I think 1st of January, President Weinberg declares 2023 the year of revival. I've already commented on that. The national budget table on the 22nd of February, pretty much as expected. No real fireworks there. 28th of February, I think the good news is that Rossing, which has provided part of the foundation of this economy for so long, has extended its life 9 to 2036. I think that's undoubtedly good. I'm going to carry on, and 3rd of March, Shell announces its 3rd discovery at the Onka 1 well. So they're drilling and drilling. The 3rd drill looks pretty good. And then on the 30th of March, we have this very strange incident involving the chair of the national board. And again, I don't want to personalize these things. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on here. But I would just say we are on the verge of major developments in the oil and gas sector. And the last thing you want when you're on the verge of major developments in the oil and gas sector is for your champion in the field to be in all sorts of turmoil. But that's exactly what we've had at the beginning of the year. Namibia drops 8th on the Mo Ibrahim Governance Index on the 5th of April. Interesting, 18th of April, Nampower and Serum signed this power purchasing agreement for a 50 megawatt wind plant in the Lüderitz. Very exciting. 19th of April, well, we heard that Peugeot was filing a lawsuit against the government for the POAN factory in Walvis Bay. Again, I don't want to get into the rights and wrongs of it. This was supposed to be a sort of flagship project, vehicle assembly in Namibia. Finally, the dream realised after so many false starts, and yet again, it suggests that we didn't do our homework properly, and maybe the investors also didn't do their homework properly, and it's basically run into the sand, unfortunately. 26th of April, Heineken completes its purchase of Namibia breweries. Again, I put it there. I mean, it shows the rest of the world is interested in our economy to the extent they want to buy in. But it struck me as rather strange that one of our premier companies was allowed to be sold off, without much fuss to an international multinational company. Possibly for the best. I don't know. These mergers and takeovers, they take years before you can actually think this was a success or this was a failure. But there it is. We make so much fuss about other things being sold off, other things, and they're nasty for our investors. And yet this one, we seem completely happy for it to go through. 3rd of May, I'm happy to report Namibia reclaims top spot in Africa on the Press Freedom Index. I think that's a big feather in our cap. It shows the sort of society we all created here. I think it's a great thing. People like me can stand at podiums like this and say all sorts of critical things about governments and everyone else. And I don't get arrested or locked up. And that's true of journalists generally. I'm sort of failed journalist, I suppose. Let me carry on. Fraser Mining Index, well, we're sort of 38th now out of 62. It doesn't seem anything very much. Hard to say. But we didn't go down, I suppose, or not much, so that's good. ECB announces electricity tariff hike, and that's a big hike by our standards, but inflation is high, they have to recover their costs. I put that in the bad column, not as a criticism of ECB, but just because obviously the more expensive your electricity is, the tougher it is for the economy generally. 26th of May, an absolute milestone in the green hydrogen story, when government and Hyphen signed this FIA, this feasibility and investment agreement, which really fires the starting pistol on all the work that needs to be done to make Hyphen a success. Very, very important. 1st of June, yeah, again, we're still struggling very often to communicate with the outside world of investors. We're sending mixed messages, negative messages, unclear messages, and we're then having to backtrack and clarify things. And I would have thought that now, after 30 years, we know that communicating globally, global investors and listed on stock exchanges and things, I would have thought we could have sorted that out by now, and that our communication would be absolutely crystal clear, but no. Fitch again, reaffirming, always reaffirming, 8th of June, government ban on unprocessed minerals. Well, this is a complex debate, and I put it in the hard to say because it very much depends on how this policy is actually applied. If it's applied in a realistic way or an unrealistic way, but it's certainly a big event. But to get policies right, you have to think much more in an economic way. That's the argument I would put. More economic, less political, less ideological. So, as I said before, I think we've hopefully avoided being grey listing, so that's good policy development. Then we get on to the Namibian Investment Promotion Facilitation Bill. And although I haven't been directly part of the consultation process myself, I have talked to a lot of people who have been, and I can only conclude that this is a very confused and unclear and possibly rushed process. I say rushed, we've been working on this since 2016. Which draft is being consulted on, how many days do we have to respond? We've already responded to particular drafts. This is what I'm getting from all the people I'm hearing. This is an absolutely key piece of legislation. I go back to my fork in the road analogy at the very beginning. We get this right, good. We get this wrong, we're in deep trouble. I'll go into it a little bit more later. But I certainly think the process of consultation hasn't been optimal. Then we've still got the NIAF, the NIAB. Is it with the legal drafters? Where is it? Has anyone seen a recent draft? I don't know. This is, again, potentially huge. It will have a very far-reaching effect on foreign investors' perceptions of this country and what they're expected to do to be able to invest here. It is very, very important. I can't underestimate that. And I know I've been going on about this for years, so you won't be surprised to hear me say that. We've got a new Minerals Act. I'm not actually quite sure. It's possibly with the legal drafters. This is also important given that our economy is based on minerals at the moment. We've got green hydrogen legislation in the pipeline. I think we all know this is a new industry. We're working on the legislative framework for it. I understand work is ongoing. We've got that strategy I mentioned earlier, but it's very important to have the legislation too. It's good to hear that that's moving forward. Special economic zones, well, I don't know. I mean, we got rid of our manufacturing incentives and export incentives some years ago. We should have been ready to replace those with something else at the time. You don't get rid of something without putting something into place. That seems to me obvious. But we didn't. And now we've got the special economic zone policy, which the cabinet committee, which with legal drafters are very hard to pin down. I haven't seen any recent drafts of this. Maybe some of you have. But again, we're always talking about lack of economic structural change. We always want to boost the manufacturing sector. At the moment, we've got nothing to offer manufacturing investors. We haven't got tax incentives, we have hardly got land, we haven't got power, we haven't got much water. All the things that manufacturers need, we can't offer them. So, and then we sit back surprised that there hasn't been structural change and the industry isn't booming in this country. Public enterprise reform, well, this is a bugbear of mine, of course, but it's gone very quiet. Has anyone reformed the public enterprise in the last decade or so? I don't think so. Maybe Namibia is the one example, which is a big one. But everything else, the RCC is still merrily going on its way. I think there's still a CEO there, and there's no criticism of her, but it's just, how can a company that achieves so little still be in existence? I can only wonder. These are opportunity costs. We could save money, we could flog off or partly privatise or close down these things and use that money for better things. That's the essential economic argument. We haven't grasped that nettle yet. And I don't detect any appetite to do so, certainly not in the run-up to an election. We've got the sovereign wealth fund legislation almost over the line. It's looking quite good in my opinion. I think this is exactly the sort of move we need to make in anticipation of things like oil and gas. We could be a world leader here, learning from the likes of the Norways and other countries, so positive. And then I was at a workshop just on Monday on this EITI, Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, whether we join up as a country or not, which will impose certain obligations on us to be open and transparent about, for example, tax revenues from the oil and gas industry. I'm undecided. I think Graham is a big fan of EITI. Certainly we could go ahead and do all these wonderful things on transparency and openness without EITI membership and save ourselves $40 million. We could do all that. But I know only too well, as someone who's studied this economy for 30 years, it ain't going to happen. I mean, our track record on fishing, does anyone here know what's going on in the fishing sector? No. Track record on diamonds, does anyone here know what's going on in the diamond sector? Well, I certainly don't, and I talk to everyone I can think of. So, maybe joining it, maybe this is a sort of a gesture, but it will still lead us back and round to the same place. If our heart isn't in it, we don't fundamentally believe in openness and transparency. And then finally, this isn't so much a policy, but it is a big development that will have an impact. The census, which is kicking off in September, which I think is great news, should have kicked off some time ago, of course. Will there be any preliminary results anytime soon? Hard to say. I think, judging by our track record again, the preliminary results will come very late and probably not even in time for the next election. We haven't really measured what's going on in our country for a long time now. The last household income and expenditure survey, I think, was 1560. The last census was 2011. We haven't measured employment, unemployment since 2018. It seems that we're just not interested in measuring things because we don't like the messages that those measurements will tell us. That's the only thing I can conclude, I have to say. How can you run a modern, sophisticated economy without data, regular quality data? I don't think it's possible, but maybe your guts tell you that you know how to do it much better than other people. So those are the policy developments I'll highlight. I'm coming to an end now. Let me say a few more words about this investment framework, because I personally cannot overstate how important this is for Namibia, going back to the 4-year road. And maybe I'm just old-fashioned, maybe I'm clearly out of tune with governments on this. But I would say there are a few fundamental truths on these things which you have to bear in mind. The first is ministerial discretion is a bad thing. The more power you give to ministers to make discretionary decisions based on who knows quite what, the less clear your investment climate and the more prone you are to corruption. I think fish stock is a clear example. We saw it coming, we saw the Act being changed in 2015, so much ministerial discretion, and hey presto, a few years later, you have fish stock. Clear rules, clear, simple rules are much better than ministerial discretion. That was drilled into me years ago, and I thought we had that in the 1990s, but apparently not. Second, ministers and businesses. Can ministers run business? Well, I would say they can't, and that's not a Namibian thing. I would say that's a global thing. In the UK, you don't want ministers running businesses because they respond to different sets of incentives and they act within a different institutional framework. A very senior minister here, and I'm not going to name him, but he was telling me, how can you expect governments to run businesses? Every time you want a pencil, you have to go through the central procurement board, and that takes, goodness knows how many months, and then, you have to fill in all this paper. No way can they be dynamic and responsive, these government businesses. So I think if you want ministers running businesses, you end up getting what we have in our public enterprises. Slow-moving, unreformable, loss-making businesses that don't really contribute much to the economy. Let business run business, and that is why it is business. That's why we have a business sector and a government sector. Government is the referee of the football match, impartial, penalises where necessary, sets the rules, and lets everyone get on with it. Politicisation, bureaucratization of business. My goodness me, when I've been writing a book on the hoops that foreign investors have to go through to now invest in Namibia, and the book just keeps on getting longer and longer. I can't really keep up. The amount of legislation and the regulators, the number of regulators and overlapping regulators and things, I mean, it's getting absolutely remarkable. When I look at the investment numbers, I'm not surprised at all. This isn't the sort of investment environment we want to create, in my humble opinion. Business has to be dynamic to be successful. Yeah, who can foresee the future by pinning investors down with performance contracts and promises of this, that, and the other? You only get the charlatans in. You only get the guys who say, I can promise you the world, give me, let me invest here, and I'll slip you a few $100,000. You don't get the successful businesses who have to respond to markets all the time, every day. They have to be flexible. So they can't pin themselves down and say, Minister, I'm going to employ 5,000 people in 2 years' time, because they don't know they're in a position to do that. It's obvious to me, but other people struggle to see it. Uncertainty and delay in themselves creates costs. So we've been struggling with this issue for a long time now, since the Act was passed, the NEPA Act was passed in August 2016. We're, 7 years down the track now? Okay, there's a consultation process. We really need to nail this. Why does it take so long? The point I'm making here is that just by dint of having this hang over the investment environment, this cloud, this need for cloud, that itself imposes costs on the economy because it creates uncertainty and people then change their decisions, their investment decisions, because of that uncertainty. It's a simple thing, and yet we seem to make the same mistake. Yes, maybe there's a belief at the end of the day, we only really want the oil and gas guys and the green hydrogen guys, and these guys are so big, they can look after themselves. The minister can't bully them, the minister can't tell them what to do. They're going to come in regardless of our investment legislation. I don't buy that myself. I'd be very surprised if we see the billions of US dollars we need to exploit the oil and gas here. We see that flowing with the current draft legislation. I might be wrong, but I have serious doubts. But the point is, do we want just the big boys here? If we do, fine. The big boys can look after themselves. They have the resources to fill out all the paperwork, to go through all the regulatory hoops and everything. But I think we want a much more balanced economy with smaller investors coming in as well. They can provide amazing value. And everything we're doing seems to be pointed at penalising precisely that investment. So that's what I've got to say on policy developments. And you say something about oil and gas. Now and again, I could have given a whole presentation on oil and gas. I was at the oil and gas conference last week, which Clement and Hans Seidel was key in organising. I found it very useful. There was lots of information. But I've tried to boil down what I thought were the key points from that two-day session to this, and we can maybe discuss this soon after I stop speaking. One is that globally the door is closing on new oil and gas projects. And I point you to the EIA's report of 2021, which essentially said no new fossil fuel projects if we're going to meet net zero by 2050. Now, of course, we haven't abided by that, and for good reason. I'm not criticising government for not doing that. I think their approach has been quite sensible. But anyway, that is the environment in which we'll be trying to finance and run a new oil and gas industry for us here, and that presents challenges. So we're up against the clock in a way. Second is Shell and Total. The discoveries so far look very big. I think Wood Mackenzie this month put it at 11 billion. That was the number mentioned at the conference last week, possibly making Namibia a top 15 global oil producer, which is absolutely huge, especially when you consider Namibia's population is 2.5 million. So it is very, very significant. Obviously, they're all in the Orange Basin down south, a long way out to sea, a long way from shore, very deep water, challenging water. So it is technically challenging. Shell and Total and other players will be challenged to get the oil out of from under the sea there. So it's not a slam dunk by any means. There's a lot of work to be done. And what I wasn't aware of before last week's conference was the potential importance of the gas side. It's not just oil, which can be pumped out relatively quickly and easily, it's the gas side of things. And that then links up with BW Energy's Kudu field and Kudu project, which is exciting, bringing the gas on shore, powering a power station using the gas, and maybe linking up all these gas wells together, oversizing the pipe that brings the gas ashore, and possibly establishing something like a Qatari-type LNG plant on the same site, which would be a significant onshore development. I mean, absolutely huge, billions here, although possibly not that many jobs. Yeah, so I would say limited jobs. Let's not get too excited. There are some jobs, obviously, some highly skilled jobs, some service industries. We don't really have much of they're not building oil rigs or drilling equipment in this country at the moment. So there will be some jobs, and Namibians need to get in on that. But I think the biggest benefit will be the revenues to government, which will be significant if all the current forecasts are right. And the question there is, this could be a huge blessing for Namibia, but history shows in many other countries that it could also be a curse if it's not properly managed. We need to manage this right, and that's why I say we're at the fork in the road. We need to get key things right. Yes, the Southern North Run looks good. Maybe EITI looks good. We're saying all the right things, and I think that's very positive. We need to do the right things. Talk is cheap. We don't want to end up managing a resource curse where essentially we become an oil-dependent economy. We've just got an oil sector and everything else withers because of the effects of the oil sector. How government spends all that revenue is absolutely critical. Does it spend it on productive things? Does it spend it on white elephants? Does it give it out in cash? Does it save it? Does it spend it? Does it spend it on new infrastructure? There's so many questions there. It's a huge fiscal challenge to government. So, yes, a blessing, but let's try and manage it properly. Green hydrogen, let me just quickly skim through this and then I'm almost at the end. Green hydrogen, one of the two developments that I flagged up last year. Let's keep a close eye on it. So HYPHEN, yes, the FIA has been signed, government's apparently going to buy in. The plan is still that they're up and running with phase 1 at the end of 2027. I think that's a very ambitious timetable, but they're sticking to that. The Cleanergy demonstration plant at Walvis Bay, they're still targeting the end of Q1 next year. That will be the first plant up and running in Namibia, but only a demonstration plant, not a commercial plant. HDF, well, their website says by 2025, their hydrogen power station, electricity generating station up by the end of 25. To me, that looks ambitious. NSense and Dowries, well, the phase 1 they're saying by Q2 2024. That looks very ambitious to me, in phases 2 to 4. Calico Green Energy Solutions, this is with this wave roller technology as well. Well, they possibly very wisely didn't put any dates on their website, so they can't be held to very much. These are young guys with some interesting ideas. Fortescue, FFI, well, Mark Hutchinson was in town a month or so ago. He's still looking at Namibia. They weren't selected for the Southern Corridor Development Initiative. They got into bed with the Dowries guys. I'm not quite sure what's happened there. They're still looking around, they're still trying to do a strategic deal with Namibia. So no dates there. High Iron, interesting project. According to their website, their Oshibela project will be up and running by late 2024. Again, it seems incredibly ambitious to me, but an interesting project. Hot Hydro, no dates at all, nothing available publicly. Chiffon, I don't even know who these guys are, but they've got a piece of land outside of Walvis Bay. It's called Chiffon Green Hydrogen. Maybe some of you know who's behind it. I'm trying to nail down as many players as possible. Anyway, I think it's good. I think things are moving forward. Let's keep track of it. Let's see what Robin says this time next year about the progress made on all these projects. I know there's a lot of skepticism. Let me finish off by looking at the coming year. There are a few things we think are likely to happen. So there's all the global developments, and I could have focused on global developments here, but I preferred much more to focus on Namibian developments. This would be another couple of hours talking about the impacts of Ukraine and the Chinese economy and the whole process of what they call friendshoring, because everyone's now worried about sanctions are being cut off from suppliers and things post-COVID. There's all these thoughts, you know, where do you outsource your manufacturing? Other things too. It's a whole global process. Energy security. We've seen what's happened in the last year. Climate policies. Okay, the Europeans rowing back a bit on climate policies. Difficult to say. Lots to talk about there, but I'm not going to do that. Possible monetary and fiscal easing in Namibia, so our interest rates seem to have peaked for now. Inflation seems to be going in the right direction. The economy seems to be bouncing back, growing, providing a bit more revenue. It just makes everything a little bit more eased across the board. Progress on hydrogen and clean energy demonstration plant. We'll see next year, according to what these companies themselves are saying, will they deliver. Manpower, a whole range of projects there. I think we all have an interest in manpower getting this right because we all use electricity and none of us want to end up having power outages like we're experiencing in South Africa at the moment. Are these projects the right projects? Are they on track? You know, will they deliver? I think we need to keep a close eye on all these things. We don't think I think is still on for early next year, which I think is great news. Further oil and gas drilling, certainly Shell and Total and some new players are coming in doing more drilling. You know, that's important, but I think there's probably, you know, there'll be almost enough to make a final investment decision, possibly sometime in 2024. More likely in 2025. So these guys have to be pretty certain before they commit to all these billions before they're putting it out. That's why this phase is so critical in terms of legislation and investment environment. Yes, I put this in because I think it's highly likely that as soon as these oil and gas companies make their final investment decision, then government can go out to the markets and say, look, we've got all this money coming in a few years' time, lend us more. And my suspicion is that politicians will want to do this sooner rather than later, preferably before elections, because that's what politicians do to win elections. And it's been given the name of pre-source curves, and you can even run into trouble with the resource curves even before the oil starts flowing. That has happened in a number of countries. And we've already seen the impact of these discoveries on the cost of Namibian debt. It's had quite a significant effect already. So something to watch out for. Will it happen in the next year? Possibly, possibly not. And then we've got elections coming up. Of course, very important elections in South Africa. We'll see where the ANC end up there. And of course, Namibian elections at the end of 2024 with the new presidential candidates. I'm not making an election forecast again. So let me sum up then. I think the messages have been pretty clear. The economy has sort of recovered almost from COVID hit. Fiscal and monetary tightening a bit more relaxed now. No significant public sector reform in sight as far as I can detect. What I mean by significant continued drilling for oil and gas. Some progress on green hydrogen, not spectacular. Steady progress. Slow progress on power. Nice if manpower can speed these things up a little bit. Continued uncertainty over the investment environment. I just see this going on and on and on as we stand, having to be corrected. And that is where we are at our fork in the road. Decisions we make over the next year or two have significant impact on the next decade and longer. Thank you very much.